Have you ever wondered what distinguishes a good speaker from a great speaker? Or maybe what takes a speaker from being ordinary to extraordinary? Well, no need to wonder anymore, because today you're going to learn about the most important skill that you can develop if you want to stand out in your industry as an expert and as a dynamic communicator. Hello, I'm Lisa Vanderkwaak. I'm the founder and CEO of the Emerging Women Speakers Academy and the Real You Institute, training and equipping women particularly, but men and women, in how to leverage speaking to grow your business and expand your influence. But today, you're tuning in to day 2 of the live stream training on the top 3 skills that women speakers need to learn if they want to get on influential stages, get hired, get rehired, and stand out in their industry. More than ever, this skill that you're going to learn about today is one of the most crucial skills that you can learn. Because we're in the age of disruption in technology and inundated by information, today you're going to learn all about capturing attention. And this is all about owning the stage. How you deliver your message is just important as what? How you deliver your content is just as important as what you deliver. So this is all about delivery and engagement. You may have heard the term owning the stage, creating curiosity, capturing attention. They're all kind of the same. I want to ask you a question. When you think of a dynamic communicator, a speaker, what are some things that keep you engaged? What do they do in order to keep you engaged? Maybe the content is really interesting, or maybe it's a topic that you're really interested in. But beyond that, there has to be some ways that they help engage you, keep you engaged. One of the biggest mistakes that a lot of speakers make when they're creating a message or when they're focusing on preparing for the stage, they actually spend an exorbitant amount of time on content. They spend oodles of time creating the content, gathering the content, even practicing the delivery of the content, but not so much the delivery style in terms of the how, but more just getting out the information. And this really does you a disservice, because, as I said, how you deliver is just as important as what you deliver. This is where really all the power comes, the impact. And that's why you've often heard it said, I'm sure, standing in your power or owning the stage. Those are all phrases that really relate to the same thing. When you're on a stage, are you showing up in such a way that you're capturing attention, that you show that this is your domain, this is your stage, and it creates that captivating audience, so to speak. It's more than just showing up and being well-dressed or well-groomed. All of those things are important, because otherwise they'll be a distraction for your audience. But today, I'm going to share with you some very, very strategic things that you need to look at in your own style and how you show up, and really begin to identify what are some of the areas that you need to begin to develop in order to master this skill. All right, are you ready? You might want to write these things down, because they are critical, 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 whether you're online or offline. Capturing attention. How you deliver is just as important as what you deliver. What is this all about? How you deliver. Is it just about style, your own personality? That has something to do with it, but it's more than that. So in order for you to help you to understand what this is all about, I want to highlight some things that you want to avoid. These are some mistakes that women make, many speakers make, but particularly I'm talking about women speakers. Women speakers make that really goes against and really hurts their power on stage, or their credibility and their impact on stage. So the first thing, there's 3 things that, and believe me, there's a few other than 3. There's more than 3, but I just limit it to 3 today, just to narrow it down to some really key ones. These are mistakes that I see a lot of women speakers make, and I want to share them with you so you can avoid them. The first one is to stand in one spot. This you want to avoid. Now, I'm online right now, so sometimes when you're doing an online platform, you don't want to be moving around a lot. You do want to stay in one spot, especially if your camera, if you want to stay in camera view and you don't have a lot of margins in order to move, then definitely you want to, but you still want it to be dynamic. You want to be able to use that space to your advantage. But if you're on a live stage, you do not want to stay in one spot. It's a huge mistake that many speakers make. And I say this especially if you are giving a keynote message, that it's not just a small 5-minute update or thing like that, but that you are a keynote speaker and doing a longer message between 30 and 60 minutes. There are sometimes, there's some restrictions that you have when they have a podium and you need to stand behind a podium. But as much as possible, even avoid that. And I know that sometimes you can't because of the organization and their way of doing things, say with convocations and things like that. But as much as possible, you want to avoid staying in one spot. The other thing is you want to avoid being stuck to your notes. That means not just relying on the script and talking while you are reading your notes like this and you're stuck to your notes. Or if you have a presentation behind you and you are reading it as a script, you want to avoid doing that. In fact, if your PowerPoint presentation is your script, then you have too much content on your PowerPoint presentation, and one of you is not needed, either you or the PowerPoint presentation, because if your audience can read it, they don't need you to say it. So you want to avoid being stuck to your notes, learning how to use it as your guide only. The last one is you want to avoid being known as suffering from sameness. Sameness. What does that mean? Meaning being predictable. You want to avoid being predictable. And how does this show up? Well, this shows up in how you open, how you close, and how you engage your audience. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But these are the general mistakes that I want you to avoid. And so what you're going to learn in a few minutes are some ways, things that you can develop, you can focus on learning in order to avoid these mistakes, okay? So the first one is you want to focus on developing the ability to create curiosity. When you create curiosity, you actually do things deliberately to engage your audience. Did you know that you only have 7 seconds to get your audience interested in what you have to say? And you only have 30 seconds to keep them interested in even listening longer. Studies show that from 7 to 30 seconds, the very opening of your message is the most critical time for you to create curiosity and to engage your audience. So if you only have maximum 7 seconds to, first of all, create curiosity and even allow your audience to start to get engaged, then how you open is absolutely critical. You have to deliberately plan your opening, because those are the crucial seconds and moments that you're going to grab their attention. If you lose their attention in the front end, it'll be harder to gain it back, especially again in this age of technology and all kinds of things that competes for our attention. When you engage them in this way, you are setting it up in such a way that you're giving them a reason to listen to you, creating curiosity. There's an adage, there's a phrase that says, people remember best what they hear first and what they hear last. So your very first words out of your mouth, and actually before you even get up to speak, the words that were used to introduce you by someone else can be a tool to use to create curiosity for the audience to be interested in hearing what you have to say. So the very first introduction to you and the very first way you show up on stage will either create curiosity or show that you're just like everyone else. What does it mean to be just like everyone else? I'm not saying necessarily that's always a bad thing, but when it comes to openings, doing things that are predictable. Let me ask you, when you watch a movie, what do they do right at the beginning of the movie to create curiosity? Well, they usually start in the middle of a story or in a conflict of a story or in a very strategic point where it makes you think, I wonder how that person got like that, or I wonder what happened, or I wonder how they're going to get out of that. And so it creates a curiosity in you that you want to keep listening. And then they may go backtrack and fill in the details to that point. So the point is that you need to do the same in some way to create curiosity, to keep your audience interested and wanting to know more. You don't have to be dramatic, you don't have to be entertaining, you don't have to be really funny, although all those things are good and appropriate at different times. I'm not saying that you have to be like someone else. You want to be yourself, but you also want to learn the skill of creating curiosity and using that front end time to your advantage. One of the ways that is very sameness is what we call pleasant unpleasantries, or unpleasant pleasantries, sorry. Unpleasant pleasantry. A pleasantry is, for example, standing up and saying, hi, thank you so much for so-and-so inviting me here today. I really appreciate it, and you go on and on and on. Everybody does that. But that's not necessarily the best way to create curiosity. And yes, you may want to thank your host, but don't do it at the first few sentences out of your mouth. You can do that a little into your message, and you can learn how to do that. That's appropriate and that's honoring, but not in the first few seconds, first few minutes either. All right, so people remember best what they hear first and what they hear last. So you want to intentionally plan your opening to create curiosity, to engage your audience, to want to know more and to listen for what you have to say. The second thing that you need to learn how to do is to move with intention. This is all about staging, when you move with intention. So again, on a virtual screen or on a virtual platform, I have less I have limited boundaries. I have more restrictions, I should say. But I'm going to show you an example of what I mean by this. That's really, really important to use your movement with intention. One of the biggest mistakes that speakers make, another big mistake, is just randomly movements or pacing back and forth as they're talking, just pacing or walking or fiddling or just movements, just kind of using movements very randomly without intention. And what it does, it waters down your message as well as can really cause distraction. So let me give you an example. If you had known me when I was in university, you would have known that I was the least likely person to become a speaking coach. In fact, I was the least likely person to even stand up in front of people to talk, because I struggled just in a small group setting, even communicating. I was so bound by fear and insecurity and really wanted to be perfect when I spoke. I remember in times when I was in a university study group and it would come time for me to speak, all the time I was waiting for my turn, I would be rehearsing in my mind what I had to say to make sure it came out perfectly. And in the meantime, obviously not listening to anybody else. And my heart would be just pounding out of my chest, and I'd be sweating and just getting really all flustered because I was so anxious about doing it right and not making a fool of myself. That's how much I was bound by fear. Now fast forward to just a few years ago when I got a phone call from a international speaker, a woman I knew who was an international speaker. And she said, hey, Lisa, I have a speaking engagement that I'm supposed to be speaking at in a couple of days, but I can't make it because of a family crisis. I'm wondering if you could fill in for me. Initially, I'm thinking, oh, well, you know what? I'm different than her in how I present. My style is different. I don't know this audience. They don't know me. I wonder if this is a good fit. But immediately after I had those thoughts, I said, sure, send me the details. I'd love to fill in for you. Okay. Now, what did I do there? First thing I want you to notice is that I created a timeline. Now, granted, it's a limited one right here, but if you have a larger stage, a wider stage, you'll get the idea that I'm trying to make here. What I did was, when I was talking about a moment in history when I was a university student, I went to this side. Now, this is actually is my right side, but you're looking at it from the left. And this is a really important point here. Because English speakers, if you are communicating in English to an English-speaking audience, then English speakers read from left to right. So chronologically, history goes from past over to present to future. So you have to make sure. So if I had said, hey, if you had known me when I was a university student and then met me 20 years later, that doesn't, it's kind of backwards, right? I think you agree. So what I did was I established a place on my stage for a moment in history, a time or an event. Same thing over here, same thing. So that later on in my message I can say, many of my clients hire me because they know I understand. And all I have to do is point to over here. And again, I'm a little limited here in the space. They know that I understand. And immediately when I point there, what comes up in your mind? Oh yeah, they know I understand what it feels like to be ridden by anxiety and fear and struggling to get words out. I'm trying to overcome the fear of public speaking. So you can do this in many ways. It doesn't not necessarily even a timeline, but just a story, a point that you're making, where you establish your stage. So you move with intention, and you use your hands or your gestures with intention, or your eyes or your expressions. Your movements create a story in and of themselves, but they also enhance your messaging. They enhance your message. So moving with intention helps you to capture attention as well as own the stage by using your space as part of your story, as part of your presentation, instead of using it as a distraction. And in one of my programs, the Speaker Success Bootcamp that I have on my online training, I go into detail about how to tell a story, like a template of telling a story well with impact. What are the things you need to include, the elements that are important to include in a story when you tell a story, and how to really maximize the use of that. It's not just a story with just by narration, okay? So create curiosity, move with intention. The third thing you need to look at developing and learning is how to speak with confidence. What are the things that steal your confidence? If you were to think about the areas that you feel the most confident, I'm sure every one of you has areas that you feel the most confident, or feel very confident, if I could say it that way. And what are some of the things that help you to feel confident in that arena? And then you might have areas, maybe it's public speaking, where you don't feel as much confidence, or you feel less confidence. You're a general manager of a very large organization, and she felt very competent and very confident in her role. Even in giving presentations to stakeholders and potential clients, she was very confident in that place. But then she decided to start her own business. And although she was used to giving presentations and standing in front of people, communicating, she felt very incompetent and lacked the confidence when it came time for her to promote her business or her services and products. Why? Because within her, there was a place of disconnect that she had to come to, a place of really owning her own value in terms of what she had to offer and the value of the product or service she was delivering, as well as believing that the people she was speaking to actually needed what she had and actually would work with her. So there was a disconnect in terms of her confidence, because it was unfamiliar, it was a new situation, and she had to now, it was her that she was promoting rather than her company. It was a little bit of a detachment there, but now it was like all the things of rejection, the possibility of rejection came up, and other fears. So sometimes confidence needs to be built in other areas. So as a speaker, what are some things that steal your confidence? I already talked about fear and anxiety. That can definitely, and that can be rooted in, the fear of rejection, the fear of judgment, the fear of making a mistake, the fear of not getting it right, of not being perfect. Perfectionism is actually something that really, really does a lot of damage to us as speakers, and it really does a disservice to your audience as well. But let's talk a little bit about some of the things that steal your confidence and then some of the things that build your confidence. In my Speaker Success Bootcamp, I talk extensively about this because having confidence or speaking with confidence is one of the foundations of owning the stage and capturing attention, because your audience will pick up whether or not you struggle, or whether or not you really believe in what you're saying, or whether or not you believe that they are buying into it, or that they are even valuing what you're saying. Your confidence will come across no matter what, or your lack of confidence. So one of the biggest things that steal your confidence is comparison. Comparing yourself to someone else. Maybe it's someone in your industry, someone, a peer, a colleague, or someone, maybe another speaker at an event that you're speaking at. There's always going to be someone better, and we're always going to be better than someone else in terms of skill set. So it's an unfair comparison. What I want to encourage you to do is compare yourself to yourself. Meaning, 3 months ago, if you, or even today, and set a goal for 3 months, if there's an area that you want to grow in confidence, measure it today, and then 3 months down the road, compare yourself to yourself. How have you grown? What's the progress you've made? Going this way. What's the progress that you've made? And so when you do that, you're actually looking at it from a growth opportunity rather than allowing it to steal your confidence. So comparison, opinions of others. Again, well-meaning people say things sometimes that we give too much credit to or give too much weight to. Yes, we need to get feedback from people. We need to have people give us input, but choose the people and the places that you get that from when you're wanting to develop your confidence in a certain area, to make sure that those people really know what they're talking about, and the kind of feedback they're giving you is valid. So that's where a good coach will come in play, whether it be a life coach, a business coach, or a speaking coach, or some other, would be a fitness trainer, some way that whatever the goal is that you're working on to gain your confidence, build your confidence. The other area that steals, I already mentioned, is perfection. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the fourth point here. So how do you build your confidence? Well, yesterday's training, we talked a lot about clarity, and gaining clarity is an extremely important way to build your confidence. When you get clear on all those areas we talked about, but also you get clear on a structure that you're going to use, a system that you have in place, a strategy of how you're going to accomplish what you want to accomplish when you're speaking, those things all build confidence. It's part of the preparation, but if you have clarity, you actually tap in to a place of building confidence, because you know what to expect, you know where you're going, and your audience knows where you're going as well. So having a structure in place, systems that you've developed, or strategy. And then the second thing that builds confidence is competence, is actually developing skills that become a solid foundation for you to operate in. When you gain new skills, so you think about it when you step into a new job. Again, you may have been competent in one area, and now you have a new job. Maybe it's learning a whole new program or whole new computer program or system. Well, you may have been competent in computers, but now this is a whole different program, and so you have to learn it from scratch, and you might feel incompetent. Or like learn a new language. You might speak one language really, really well, but now learn a new language, you feel incompetent because you haven't really learned the skill of it. So as we go along in that process of developing skills, it actually builds our confidence. when we become more competent. And then coaching. Coaching also helps us to build confidence by providing the feedback that we need, giving us tools and strategies and ways to be able to, for example, harness the fear, overcome the fear, or to utilize our space, deliver our content more dynamically. All those things help us to build confidence. A lot of times practice is an important piece of confidence. Right. But I want you to know that sometimes practice doesn't always make perfect, especially if you're practicing the wrong skills or the wrong habits. Then what you're doing is just reinforcing bad habits. So you need to make sure that you are practicing the right things. And that's where feedback from people who are skilled in that area, or a coach or someone, would help you to determine if you need to shift some habits, create new habits, let go of some. We see this a lot with public speaking as well. So practice does help to build confidence if you are practicing the right things. Creating curiosity, moving with intention, speaking with confidence, and then connecting deliberately. Alongside confidence, connection. This is basically everything about owning the stage. It's how you connect with your audience, engaging your audience. As I mentioned before, it's not about just giving information, it's about evoking transformation in the minds and the hearts of your audience members, of your listeners, whoever is taking the time to listen to you. We do not need to give more information, but we do need to help people understand how the information can impact their lives and why they need it, or how they can utilize it to solve a problem or to make their life better or to overcome a challenge, whatever it might be. So how you do that is actually in connecting on a personal level with your audience members. Even if you're online, and especially if you're online, there's a few things that are absolutely critical if this is your platform for speaking. So I'm going to talk about 3 ways today that you can begin to connect with your audience in a deliberate way. This is a phrase that you can begin to implement these 2 ways right away. It's speak to one and look to all. This helps to summarize 2 ways that you can begin to engage your audience on a deeper, more personal level. So the eyes are really important. And again, online, this is extremely important. If I stood here or sat here and was communicating to you and reading my notes the whole time, or I'm looking over here talking to you, how does that make you feel? You feel, hey, I'm right here. Connect with me. Even online, you can engage your audience by using your eyes and making sure that your eyes are in the right place. That's going to make them feel like you're talking just to them, just like I'm talking just to you. So the eyes are really important. If you're on a live stage, your eyes need to be free enough, not bound by perfection where you have to read your notes or stuck to your notes, where you can be free to engage your audience with your eyes and with your body and with in other ways as well. So let me give you an example. When I say speak to one and look to all. When I speak, how I ask the questions or the language I use can either engage the audience at a deeper level, personal, or just get a group response. I want you to think about, when I ask this question, what comes up for you in your mind, what image or what feeling, and let me know if you feel the difference or can see a difference. How many of you have ever said something that you wished you could take back? Okay, now I'm going to say it a different way. Have you ever said something that you wished you could take back? I'd be curious to know if you did feel a difference or have a different response within you for both of those questions. Some of you have heard me give this example before, so you may have already been ready for it. But I want you to notice something. When I say how many of you, and this is a common way that speakers speak or ask questions, they say, how many of you? And what I'm doing is actually asking for a group response. It's a group think, because everyone's going to say, yes, I have said things that I wish I would take back. But they don't make a personal connection. It's just like, yeah, of course we have. Of course. It's more of a group response. Whereas when I said, have you ever, I'm using a you word that's singular. And so it's asking a singular question to one person. Even though I'm talking to a large audience, it's one person. So then I began to reflect when oh, have you ever? And I began to reflect in a moment in time when, yes, I remember that moment. And it was awful. We begin to have a personal reflection, and that becomes embedded in our mind. So it makes a personal, deeper connection with your audience. And so while I'm doing that, if I'm in an open live situation, then I would let my eyes gaze briefly, make eye contact with one person when I ask that question. Have you ever said something, or have you ever said something that you wished you could take back? And then as I continue on to speak, I would make sure I, let my eyes go through the other people. So it's just a brief moment where I'm gazing and making eye contact with one person. Even though I'm only making eye contact with one person in that moment, everybody else feels like I'm talking to them. And that's what you want. You want your audience to feel like you are talking just to them. And how does that happen? It's by the verbal language, how you structure your language that brings a deeper connection. And of course, the eyes. So that's just one example. The other one is, so that's verbal language, your eye contact. A third way that you can connect on a deeper level is understanding about the silent messages that you send. What do I mean by that? Did you know that you have silent messages that actually can sabotage your effectiveness? What are those silent messages? They're the messages that your body gives off. Whether it's your facial expression, your movements, distracting tendencies or habits, or things that you're not even aware of that you do that are like a silent message. And maybe it's actually incongruent. It doesn't match your verbal language. It doesn't match the tone or the feel of the experience that you're trying to create with your words. It's actually opposite. So those silent messages can actually cause a disconnect with your audience if they're not in congruency or match the verbal language. That can be from your movement, from a lot of different ways. Large body movement or small movement, like if you're fiddling with something. So if I'm doing this and I'm talking to you, then you might think, wow, is that person really nervous? They seem to be, and so it's distracting, and it can actually kill your message. It can actually sabotage you. So some ways for you to be aware of that help you to really engage your audience or connect with them in a deliberate way. And when you do this, when you begin to focus on these things, it actually helps you to capture the attention of your audience, but own the stage where people feel engaged, they're with you, and they feel like you're actually speaking to them. Really, really key that people walk away with that personal connection or that sense of, hey, wow, I really got a lot from that. And sometimes it's just the talk that goes on in the brain as a result of what you're saying or doing, because it's a personal conversation that's going on. Does that make sense? Let's just recap. So some things you want to avoid is you want to avoid staying in one spot. You want to avoid being stuck to your notes. You want to avoid suffering from sameness. You want to look at your delivery as you show up right now and have a look at how well you're doing in these areas, or which of these areas that you need to start to focus on. And just even say the 3-6 months down the road, what do you need to focus on to help you develop some of these skills so that you can be one who owns the stage and captures attention? Do you need to create curiosity? Do you need to learn how to create curiosity by planning an opening, by engaging your audience at different levels? Do you need to move with intention, learn how to move and use the stage to your advantage? Do you need to learn how to speak with more confidence and identify those things that steal your confidence and begin a strategic plan of building your confidence? Or maybe you need to know and learn how to connect more deliberately with your audience rather than just being focused on giving content. If you focus on these things and practice your delivery, incorporating some of these skills, you will find a noticeable difference in not only how engaged your audience will be, but also the response and the impact they will walk away with. Take one or two of these areas and begin to set yourself a plan to find out how you can develop them and begin to take a strategic steps forward in developing them so that you can move from being an ordinary speaker to being an extraordinary speaker.